Got your DNA test results? Wondering where to start? Donna Rutherford has advice on your very first step you should take with your DNA test results. Listen in.
Hi.
Hi, Donna. So it's lovely to see you. And for me, this conversation is a bit of a luxury because I just want to be nosy. Because so I see you very much. You're always helping people with their DNA, and whether that's the things that we do either via DNA Club or the talks you've done for us in the past, and of course clearly through Facebook, just like always helping other people. So I want to know, like, what made the DNA bug get under your skin? What was your first moment where DNA came into your life?
I did my first DNA test in 2015. It's actually quite funny because I had a boyfriend a while back who did a Y-DNA test a long time ago, and it was before they could tell you very much. They only tested a few markers, and I was sort of like, oh, that's rubbish. I would, I looked into it, and he was a genealogist. I was a genealogist. I looked into it and said, it's not really going to tell you very much. It's just going to tell you that you came out of Africa 250,000 years ago, like all the other men on Earth. And anyway, it arrived, and pretty much that's all it told him. And then roll forward 10, 15 years, and I was here in London when Ancestry rolled out the DNA tests, the direct-to-consumer autosomal DNA test. So I'm like, well, I'm going to take one now because I'd read up on it and it seemed like it was going to be useful. And I've never had any contact with that boyfriend again. So I do wonder if he ever sees me. He doesn't live on this side of the world. If he ever sees me doing all this DNA after what I said to him. But so yeah, funny story. So I did the DNA test with Ancestry in 2015, very early, one of the first people to test. And there was just something about it because I work in IT. I've always worked in IT. Professionally, I was a financial auditor, accountant, and then moved into IT. I think the whole thing with numbers and a bit of technical stuff thrown in, it was just my skill set. It was just everything that I'm about, numbers and genealogy and technical stuff all thrown together. So I just loved it and dived right into it and just sucked up everything I could to learn. And so, of course, once I'd learned how to do it, I wanted other people to get that real joy I felt with knowing more about my ancestry because I'd done a DNA test. And the only way to get more people along was to try and help them as well. So I just ended up sort of helping people, and that teaches me more because people will come to me with questions and I'm like, oh, I need to figure out how to do that. So teaching other people actually teaches me as well, because these are the things that I'm like, I don't like it if I can't answer a question. So I go away and learn and do that. And I'm actually doing it at the moment with AI for genealogy as well. So, it's another new thing that's come along, and I want to really help people get started with it so people find that same joy of what it can bring to their research. And again, if I can help other people, that's how I'm going to learn as well. That was a very long answer to that question.
No, it's great. I mean, you actually kind of answered one of my other questions because I first came across you with your DNA hat on, and so I was always wondered, like, were you a family historian first and foremost who got into DNA, or was it your professional background, as you say, or your IT, very mathematical brain, all that kind of scientific side of your head which got you in? So clearly you were already into family history. Yeah. So what about your family history? Have you got any what's clearly you've got a family story of migration. So what else in your family history?
So a lot of my family had all come, my mum's side of the family especially, had all come with the early settlers into New Zealand. So I always found that interesting, speaking to a great aunt on my mum's side and my uncle on mum's side. We just got really interested in what they knew about the family coming to England and why they'd come to New Zealand, why we were in New Zealand. And then my uncle, who I'm very close to, he moved over to the UK as well, a lot earlier than I did. I was still quite young. But he was actually then able, back in the days when all the birth, marriage, death certificates were at Somerset House, he was going to get those. And then I mean, it's so old ago. I think he used to like telex me information and then fax me information, and then finally we were able to share things via email. So he sort of helped me on mum's side and then when DNA came along, I started giving him a whole lot more information from my mum's side. So we've kind of worked together on our family history over the years. But yeah, I was about 13 when I first started looking at the family Bible, asking stories about people who came from England. And I always wanted to live in England for that very reason. It felt like it was my cultural homeland. This is where all my family came from.
Yeah.
And then on my dad's side, they're all Scottish. They came to New Zealand a lot later. But I've always loved Scotland. I've always wanted to go and live in Scotland. I've been fascinated with Scotland since I was young. I follow Scotland and the Six Nations rugby. And so I kind of got into, well, where did my Scottish family come from? So it's just, yeah, I just love it. I just love finding out why we're here, who made us, who we are. Like everyone that's come before us is part of who we are now. And I think we understand that more so with DNA, that we really do carry around many of our ancestors with us every day.
Yeah, and that sense of connection, as you say, so you coming back to live in England, it's you kind of you already feel as though you've got roots here, and you have got roots here from your ancestors. Yeah.
My grandmother was born in London. My dad's dad, she was born here in London. She was Cockney. And she was always fascinated with, like the Cockney rhyming slang and telling us all about the family as they lived. They lived in London through the whole Victorian London times when times were really tough, and got some not so nice stories on that side of the family when my great grandfather committed suicide when he'd had a work accident and things like that. But it's just trying to find out what their lives were like. I just find it absolutely fascinating.
Oh yeah, totally agree with you. So when you're helping other people as well, I bet you get swept up in their stories. And are there kind of questions which you come around time and again, which you find people getting stuck on in the DNA Facebook group?
From a DNA point of view, a lot of people get stuck at the very beginning of the process because they they do their DNA test and the results come back, and then they're just sort of overwhelmed by so much data and information. They don't really know where to go with it. What do I do next? So the question I hear all the time is, what do I do now? I've got all this information, but I don't know how to make sense of it for it to help my research. And certainly with DNA research, we have to do that. We've got to work out a way to take this massive data and information and sort of get it down to bite-sized chunks that we can work on, and then figure out how that's going to help us with a piece of our research, this part of our family or that part of the family. And so that's really important. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. They just don't really know what to do. And they might just look at one match and try and figure them out, and they're scratching their head and they don't really know what to do next.
That's such a good point, Donna, because when we do our regular non-DNA family history, it's painstaking. We gradually gather the clues little by little, and you might get, a family of 6 or 7 people on the census in one hall, but it's slow, really, isn't it? Whereas DNA is the flip side of that, where you go from knowing nothing, and you first get your match list back, and then you suddenly into the thousands, and big sense of overwhelm.
Yeah.
So are you naturally this is really nosy, but in your normal personal life, are you a really organized person, or is it just family history brings out those organizational skills?
No, I'm really organized in my working life as well. So I work as an operations manager for a big corporate outsourcing company, and I look after a lot of our sort of productivity programs. So I'm always working with the different tools that we use, and I have people that help me work those tools, provide data to me. And I take all that data that they provide to me and the reports they do for me and kind of bundle it all together again into bite-sized chunks that I can feed out to the organization to help them understand the cost savings they're making and then where they can look for more. So it's a very similar skill set in that I have to organize all this work. I have to organize people. And, you know, when I get these reports, sometimes every day, once a week or whatever, I mean, they are huge, huge spreadsheets that we have to distill down into just one slide sometimes. So we can have this huge spreadsheet and we just want one slide or one number out of it. So I have to know how to find the right information to tell the story that we want to tell.
Cool. I remember, and it's really stuck in my head, and I think it was during lockdown, and I think you'd had a jogging accident, and you were there, and you had a pad of paper and some colours, like some colour crayons or felt tips, and you were like, nothing was going to stop you doing your DNA, and you had that ability to distill down a potentially really complicated data set into like, I am so determined to do this, I'm going to do this with kids' crayons, I just don't care. And so you do have that capacity to kind of make it simple, like the tool is there to help you and keep the tool and the kind of clarity, keep the tool simple and keep clarity on it. So when you say when you're first helping people out and they've got their sense of overwhelm, they've got all their DNA matches back and they're wondering what to do with them, is there like a step or a tool or a set of steps? Like what do you tell people to first go and do?
The very first step, and I always kind of draw this out for people, is the first thing we want to do is get those matches into groups. And this is a method we talk about in genetic genealogy called clustering. So if we can take all our matches and distill those down into, say, 10 groups, then we can just work on a group of matches instead of getting sidetracked by a very small match that is probably very distant or possibly a false match. We can work on the real matches that are all sharing DNA with each other and are likely to fit in one very known part of our tree, or perhaps actually even produce a mystery for us because we see how they connect and we can't work out how we connect to them. So, but if we distill it into these little groups or what we call clusters, then it's just a much simpler and easier step to say, well, I'm just working on this little group of matches today, and I'm going to try and work with them and figure out where they fit in my tree. If it all becomes too hard, we might move on to another group. But if we just look at our, 100,000 matches or 20,000 matches and say, where do these people fit? I mean, we're not going to be able to do it like that. So creating these clusters is our very first step in genetic genealogy.
And I guess that is a little bit like not the process, but the kind of concept, the way we do our regular family history. We're dealing with one branch or one nuclear family or whatever, but normally a branch. And then when the going does get tough, we kind of feel like we've run out of ideas for the moment. Then we do move on to a different branch, don't we? And you keep kind of building up your family knowledge, and gradually one bit of information helps inform and unlock clues on another. So it's got some parallels. And I think also with so clearly when we're starting out with our DNA, we need to be getting organized and putting our DNA matches into these groups. But with DNA, it's not, you don't just get lots of information at the start, it's ongoing, isn't it? You keep gathering more information, drilling down, getting more and more detail. So how do you personally keep track of, when you've got your group and then you're finding out more information about them and how you're related to them and how they're related to each other, etc. How do you keep track of all of this?
Well, I do it in different ways depending upon whether I'm working on my tree or like a client case or something where I'm helping other people. For my own matches, I tend to keep track of all my research just in my tree, and my tree is kind of like my workspace. And everything, all my matches that come in, I slot into my tree as soon as I can, or I have a research tree as well. If I can't figure out how they connect to me, I put them into my research tree so I can go back and manage them there. And within my tree, I keep all my notes, I keep all my screenshots. But when I'm working on a client case, there's a lot more information that I need to track. And that's, the question they've asked me, the mystery they're trying to solve. And I don't know their tree in the way I know my tree. I know when someone's come from a certain part of New Zealand where they might fit, or if they've come to London, they're going to be my London side. So with a client case and somebody I don't know, I need to kind of I need to start to kind of see all that in my head, if you like, and understand it. So I can't just start building trees and putting, I mean, I do start building trees and putting all the matches in trees, because that's how we work out how they're all connected to each other. But on the side, I do need to keep some form of note taking. And I've used all sorts of different note taking over the years because I need it for work as well. So I might keep notes in the OneNote program, which is very much like Evernote. So it's a note-taking tool. Or I might sometimes, if it's quite an in-depth project I'm working on for someone, I might need a project management tool like Airtable or Notion, or I actually use sometimes Todoist to keep some of my information kind of in task lists as well. So I can track what I'm doing for somebody, and I can easily get back to where I am in my project. So it really depends on how I'm working. Sometimes I just will keep a spreadsheet as well. And especially if I'm working on a site that doesn't have an easy way of doing our clustering, so creating those groups on a site, then I will do that on a spreadsheet. Now, of course, with my IT skills, and I'm in spreadsheets all the time, I do a lot of really advanced Excel, where I'm doing all sorts of fancy stuff with pivot tables and pulling data streams together and creating all sorts of lovely stuff. But there's some really easy, basic Excel tools that you can use to create like a list, do your clustering in Excel, and create what we may even call like a cluster analysis. So we could list down all our matches, do all our clusters, give them a color code, but then we could start to write some notes in there as well. So we've got a really nice record of everything we've been doing. And that could just be for a particular branch of your tree where it's really tricky and you've got a lot of matches, or you might be helping a friend out and you don't, you just want to keep kind of a record. And spreadsheets can be really helpful with that. If you just know a few basic commands and how to move columns around and name columns and resort columns, you don't need to have a lot of advanced techniques with Excel or Google Sheets or whatever spreadsheet you want to use. With a few basic steps, you can create something really pretty clever in Excel that you can use as almost your project management tool, or your cluster analysis, as I said, to use and know where you're up to with your research.
That's really encouraging to hear, because if we're on a steep learning curve, learning more about DNA, particularly when we're first in those early weeks and months of doing DNA, or even first few years, because depending on how quick you get off the starting block, like I think lots of us get the DNA results back and then go, whew, haven't got time to get my head around that right now. So sometimes you can have had your test results back and then maybe put them to the side because you're not sure where to go next, and then they'll wait for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, so sometimes we don't kind of hit the ground running because we feel we do need to learn new skills, don't we? So it's nice if we can use things like Excel, which maybe we might be find them more accessible. We've already got the software. We haven't got the learning curve with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I only use Excel super simple, just the things you said,
Yeah.
just labeling columns, sorting it, color coding.
And if you can do that, I mean, you can create your own way of creating your notes and your clusters and your research notes, whatever you want. And so it's just a little bit more clever than maybe a blank page in OneNote or Evernote, for example. You've got a few more smarts built in, and as you realize you want to, well, it'd be really nice if I could just color code these cells and then resort them. And if you don't know how to, it's really easy to find that help online as well. So, over my years in IT, I've taught people how to use Excel. And, back in the day when I started, it was Lotus 123 was our very first spreadsheet tool. But through the years, Excel now has just like got so many amazing, powerful things in it. And I always think it's a bit like genealogy sometimes. You don't know what you don't know. Sometimes you've got to start thinking, well, what about that? How could I do that? And then go and find out how to do it. Instead of expecting that you're going to know everything straight up. And we always say to people with DNA testing, look, it's a steep learning curve. Don't be hard on yourself if you don't get it. It's going to take a while. And it took, I mean, I'm self-taught with the DNA side, but I've gone to a lot of genealogy conferences. I've been speaking at them in more recent years, but I read a lot of magazine articles. I followed all the different bloggers, and I actually created myself a big notebook. And I would just write everything I was learning in my big notebook. But then I'd say, what do I want to learn next? What don't I know? Why can't I explain that? And then go and look for those answers. And it's a bit like how I've then translated that to helping other people. If they're asking me something I don't automatically know, I want to go and find out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's why family history or DNA family history, it never gets boring, because there's always new things, and sometimes beginners can ask the hardest questions because they have such a different perspective that even someone who's experienced may not know the answer, because it's a bit of an unusual way of looking at things. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Donna, and hopefully this is a fun question. But so when doing our family history, we're always getting asked new questions, and even if we feel very familiar with the topic, there might be something that we haven't thought of before. So have you had a question recently where someone asked you something that set you off on one of these learning journeys? Can you think of something?
I can think of some, but they're kind of private things that have come up with some client work where
Yeah.
I mean, I can talk about them in vague terms, but I had one where everything was coming back to a man who changed his name. And when I followed that man through, and I had to find all sorts of interesting ways where people would change their name. Where would I find someone who's changed their name in the UK? And then I found the Gazette and the notice in the Gazette of his change of name. And it turned out it was someone who was actually not, it was actually very well known. And I had to go back to the client and say, look, you might not believe me, but I have found this family, but this man who's changed his name is most likely your biological father. Everything was pointing to that had to be the man. And I said, but he's changed his name and he's quite well known. Who's this man? Turned out he was a family friend. So, and so now they're looking at someone who's writing a biography about this man. And they were approached because of the DNA work I did and said, did you know that we've just found this out? And I had to write a report that might be used by this biographer because it's changed his entire story. The biographer's like, well, this is something that we didn't know until now. And no one knew until I knew. And sometimes that feels really weird. You're kind of like, I'm the only person that knows. There might be one other person, maybe the mother, but I'm probably the only person who knows who this lady's father really is. And it's this sort of well-known man. And so, it's changing so many lives. And
Definitely.
And now it's possibly going to change a book that was about to be released all about his life, because my work has completely changed what his life actually was. I mean, they obviously knew all about the name change. They'd done all of that. In fact, they said to me, well, it can't be this man because he changed his name. And this lady said, oh, no, she knows all that as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was quite, I mean, it's not something that when you're doing your own family tree, it doesn't matter if you find something, you can tell the rest of your family. It feels easier to deal with if it's your family, but it's somebody else's family, and it's someone who's writing a book about a well-known person who've just found out something about their life that no one else knew. It's kind of scary, really. Then you're sort of like,
I mean, that's the responsibility with the knowledge, isn't it? Because you partly you have to kind of know for yourself, are you confident with the fact that you can handle finding out things you might not expect, and then what you do with that information. So if it's just a matter of telling your family, even within my family, there'll be some people who are happier and less happy to hear certain things, and I bet that's the same with every family. But then, as you say, the book is an additional layer on that, because this is like, not just are you happy to know this information, but are you happy for anyone who reads the book to know the information? So it's got an extra layer of diplomacy required, I guess, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of it makes you start to think about the ethics probably more than I normally would. I'm always very cautious of ethics and doing things very ethically. especially with client work. You don't share, you don't contact people unless they want you to, and everything else. And I always lay that out as to, I'm kind of the technical backroom person doing the work for you, but I can't support you emotionally. I can't support your family. All I can do is kind of this backroom work like I do at work. I can do all this backroom work and produce you a lovely report, but I can't help with what that might mean to you. And then when something like that is just kind of hits you in the face, it's like, well, how do I deal with this? Like this, it's, because I'm not emotionally attached to it, I can't offer that sort of support. So it was really difficult for me, difficult for the client, but it was so far reaching. And every time that person comes up in anything on TV or in a conversation, I'm like, I know something about him that nobody else knows.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's kind of weird to have that knowledge and know that you can't share it, and nor would I for any reason. It's apart from with the client, and it's up to them how they want to share it forwards, like they did with the biographer. But it's you sometimes forget how important this can be while you're sitting there creating your nice colored clusters on your piece of paper, on your spreadsheet. You forget that these real lives behind all of this, and that comes with a lot of additional things than just technical skills.
That's so true. And when we are doing our clustering, we're such a network that there's all of us are going to have experiences of different levels of surprises. So some people are going to have bombshell moments, which they may or may not welcome into their life. And then other people are going to be kind of on the periphery of that. So you might, as you say, uncover somebody else's bombshell. And but I think, that's how it's always been. There's always been family history. There's always been family secrets, but DNA kind of makes it a little less arguable. You can't argue the toss. It's kind of it's got kind of actual evidence, which is a bit
it's there in black and white.
Yeah. Donna, it's been so great speaking to you, and I'm really excited because later this month we're going to be seeing you again, aren't we? Because we're running a masterclass, and so this is going to be a two-part, really in-depth learning experience. It's going to be tutored entirely by Donna, and she's going to be helping us learn how to get our heads around our DNA and get it organized so we can see it with some clarity. So Donna, do you want to talk a little bit about what you've got planned for the masterclass?
So we're going to become organised genetic genealogists.
Yay!
And we're going to break it down into two parts. And we're going to start with the part I was talking about earlier about what do we do when we get all our DNA back, and we can be overwhelmed with this amount of data and information that we're given on the site. So we're going to spend the first class talking about clustering. And this is where we group together our DNA matches based on shared matches. And I'm going to talk about how to do it, which is actually really easy. But then I'm going to talk about different methods for doing it, using a spreadsheet, doing it on a piece of paper, doing it on a site that has some tools for you to do that. And then I'm also going to talk about, how we could cluster to get different types of information as well, depending upon how we want to organize ourselves. So the first bit is going to be all about organizing our DNA matches. And then, which is just exciting in itself, because it really is going to help everybody just know what to focus on. But the second class is going to be more about some of the other tools that we can use in our research to help organize ourselves. So like using things like OneNote and Evernote to make notes. Do we want to keep some notes off site? I always tell people, a lot of people say they like to keep all their notes on a DNA site. But if that match suddenly decides to delete their DNA or hide their DNA, there goes all our notes as well. So we do need to think about how we might be able to organize ourselves to keep those notes somewhere off site. So they're always available to us should our match decide to disappear. And then we're also going to look at using spreadsheets, because this is something that I think everybody will like doing if I can just help them with the basics.
I can't wait for it, Donna. I can't wait. I think it's really good. Yeah.
And we're just going to talk about setting up your spreadsheet, a good way to set it up, some ideas, and then look at how do we move columns around, how do we sort things, how do we color things, and then maybe delve into a few other additional advanced features of Excel that you might like to try as well if you already know the basics. So I'm really, really excited about that, because we often talk about all the DNA work, like the clustering, which is really important, but we don't necessarily help people with the tools that they can use to maximize that information they're getting out of their clustering. So we're going to look at how we can create some cluster organization on a spreadsheet as well. And yeah, lots of really good ways of using Excel and lots of things to look at. We may even look at doing some equations if we have time, because but we're going to cover also some project management tools and maybe some graphing tools as well. You know, you often see people come up with really nice graphs of their DNA matches. We're going to talk about if you're setting up a little project, you know, what are the good tools you can use for projects? Is Airtable a good option? Could you just do it in a spreadsheet? Could you do it in OneNote or Evernote and so on? So we're going to talk about all the different ways that you can organize your research, organize yourself, so you can maximize all the information that you're going to get after clustering all your matches.
Absolutely brilliant, because it isn't it, when we're organized, we save ourselves time, we can actually spot the evidence, we can start to analyze the evidence that we've got once we're organized with it, and we don't forget things. So it's like win win win, isn't it? It's really good.
Yeah. Sometimes just being able to see like a cluster chart from Excel sometimes is much more meaningful for people than just trying to look at long match lists on a site. So I'm going to cover lots of tools in the second part of the talk, because not all tools resonate with all people. Some people like this particular tool over that tool. Some people are more suited to spreadsheets. Some people like a note-taking tool. Someone might want to look at a project management tool like Airtable, for example. So I'm going to talk about them all so people can pick and choose the ones that are best suited for them, or just go and have a go. Just go and have a go at all of them. Just that everything has free trials. Go and have a go and see which one works best for them, because the one that works best for them is the best one for them to use.
Very true. Well, thanks so much, Donna. We're looking forward to your masterclass, only a few weeks to go, or maybe whenever you watch this video, it might be less than a few weeks. And we're going to have a great time and learn masses and get better at doing our DNA, which is, yeah, surely a good thing. Thanks,
I cannot wait.
Yeah, true. I can't either.
Thank you so much, Helen.